You're listening to another great podcast in the MyMac Podcasting Network.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the show where we take a wander around the week in Apple, Apple News, reviews, technology, associated products, and all sorts of other things that catch our eye. This is another episode of the Essential Apple Podcast. Hello everybody, we're back. We are back after the double bonus super length episode from the week with no news. I am joined this week by semi-regulars Nick Spligosh Riley. Hello Nick.
Hi Simon. Yeah, it's good to be back.
Excellent. And Donny Artie Cha Yankellow. So, hello Donny.
Hello, it's been a while.
It has, but there we go. That's all fine. Well, of course, after the week that had almost no news when I recorded with John, there's been a deluge. Of course there has. Absolute tidal wave of stuff. We've had a new MacBook. Ooh, shiny MacBook. Apparently with yet another version of the butterfly keyboard. What's that, revision 4? How many butterfly keyboards is that now, chaps?
I've no idea.
No, I think it's 4. I think they did the original and then version B. And then
at least 3.
I think this is the 4th. I think this is the 4th one. Anyway, we've had the Wwdc 19 invitations, quote unquote, as they're not invitations, are they? They're an invitation to enter the lottery. And of course, we've had the whole Huawei blacklisting affair and a depressingly long list of security stories, which we might or might not cover. Okay, well, so where do we want to start, chaps? I suppose we should start with the more powerful 8-core MacBook Pro. What's that? That's 3 revisions in a year to the MacBook Pro.
Very unusual for Apple to do that, isn't it?
Well, I was listening to Cult of Mac, and Irfan was saying, I wanted to say, What? Another revision already? You've obsoleted, not really, but, you've obsoleted my brand new MacBook Pro, in only 3 months, Apple. And then he said, and then I looked in the mirror and said, I've been moaning for years that they don't do spec updates. I can't moan at them for doing what I wanted. So I'm just going to have to suck that one up. But, having been a very long time Mac user, I do remember a period when, spec updates seem to come round 2 or 3 times a year. Not necessarily on the same range, as it were, but
yeah.
The Macs would get regular updates, and then it fell back. And of late, we've come to the point where sometimes it's a year or 2 years or more, in some cases, without an update.
I mean, that's partly because of Intel, isn't it? I mean, it's not just Apple sitting on their on their bottoms, not doing anything. It's simply that Intel's roadmap has been quite slow in moving forward.
I also think sometimes it's been a case of not only, yes, Intel's roadmap hasn't always moved forward at the the pace they've predicted, which I guess is just the sort of thing that goes with the territory, but also Apple have their own kind of release cadence, as it were, and Intel haven't always fallen in line with that, have they? Sometimes Apple have released, a new MacBook Pro, and then Intel have finally said, a month afterwards, oh, well, these new chips are now ready. And then people are like, well, if Apple had waited a month, but it doesn't work like that, really, does it?
No.
Intel...
Hence the midterm updates that tend to just be released by an announcement.
So this, this is a new, more powerful 8-core. I think the last one was 6-core, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think so.
The vast majority of people aren't going to notice any difference whatsoever. It's only going to be people who are doing processing that needs 8 cores.
Well, of course, this one also accepts up to 32 gig of RAM, which is the thing that Apple were getting slated for, wasn't it? People were saying the MacBook Pro isn't Pro enough because 16 gig of RAM isn't enough.
I sometimes think, that we just think that the bigger numbers are better,
Yes.
and there isn't actually any reason to. I mean, I'm running this iMac I've got here on 8 gig, and it's more than sufficient.
Yeah.
I never feel that the machine is slowing me down or not working fast enough. But then again, I'm not processing video or doing the things that needs the power.
No, I don't.
And I guess the vast majority of Apple users are the same. And it's only going to be a fairly small percentage who actually will say, "Oh, 8 cores, I've got to have that." Other than those who will just say, "I've got to have that because it's the new shiny."
Well, yes. Yeah. I think there is a certain element of that. I think you're right that people feel that they must have this super, extra powerful machine. And
yes, and I suppose the more, it makes sense that if you're putting 8 cores in something, then if you are going to be using all those cores, you're probably going to need the 32 gig of memory as well. So
yeah,
it's a good thing.
And it's a good thing. I think it's probably the MacBook Pro that pros were waiting for, as it were. Although you get a lot of that, a lot of people talking about pros and their MacBook Pros, and I think if I was a professional video editor, would I really want to try and do it on a little 13-inch MacBook Pro screen?
That's a good point.
Because whenever I try and do stuff at home on my laptop, like for example, I did a presentation for my Mac user group on Affinity Publisher in the week, and I have to say that trying to get to grips with it on a little tiny laptop screen is somewhat challenging. For where at work I have a 27-inch iMac with a old 21-inch cinema display as a second monitor where I put all my palettes.
Because I would expect someone like that would have a monitor like that for their main main work, and just have their laptop as their main machine, just so they can take it with them on the go too.
Well, yeah, there is that. But I just often, people have all this shouting, and I'm thinking, how many pros? If you, I just thought, if you spend your life working in video rendering or whatever, then surely you have a desktop machine and honking great monitors and all the other.
Yeah,
gubbins.
Because in all honesty, if you're using a 13-inch or even a 15-inch MacBook, they're not in the best position. If you're working all day, you want to be sitting upright and with a decent sized screen.
Well, I'm just thinking, even if you're going to do the whole clamshell mode, stick it in some sort of dock so that it's actually powering. You're using a real keyboard, as it were.
But then you're going to use an external monitor, probably.
Yeah, but even then, if ultimate power is what you want, is a laptop actually the best way to get ultimate power? I don't think it is. Surely you want a desktop.
No, well, because even the processors are laptop processors, aren't they? So they're not underpowered, but they're
they're not the most powerful ones you can get.
Yeah, specifically designed to save power.
Yeah. So anyway,
as opposed to the opposite. Yeah.
There we go. So no, it's a good thing. Of course, there were some negative comments I saw online. People saying, "Well, if you go and take it all the way to the max on, max out everything on the 15-inch, it'll cost you an eye-watering $6,500." And it's like, yeah, but it starts at about $1,300.
No one's forcing you to max it out.
Exactly. This is one of those. That's like, I always think, if I...
No, it starts at, it says at the bottom of the article, it starts at $17.99 for the 13-inch.
Right, $17.99, is it?
$2,399 for the 15-inch.
You can buy a car for $25,000, but you can get the same car maxed out probably for $40,000 to $50,000.
Yeah, well, that's it. I can go and buy myself a runaround for £10,000 or whatever, or I could go to Ferrari and pay an eye-watering amount of money.
Right.
It's like, no, I don't get that, and I still hold up that Yes, I remember the 2FX. Thank you. £9,000. Stop your whining. Right. Okay. Well, there we go. I think
here's something I just found interesting, and that's probably not new news, but I was pricing all the laptops between the Air, the MacBook, and the Pro. And when I taught at high school about maybe 10 years ago, these are 9th through 12th graders, I was always, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but all the kids would buy the MacBook Pro, and I would be like, you don't need that. Get the MacBook. It's more than enough for what you need. And it's so much cheaper, but there's only $100 price difference between getting a Pro and a MacBook Air now. There's no $1,000 or less laptop unless you get a refurb.
Yeah, that is a thing, isn't it? I felt that quite acutely. Really started when they killed the white plastic MacBooks.
Yeah,
because there were people who ragged on those as cheap or kind of somehow substandard. But they were
great machines.
I had several, and I thought they were brilliant machines. And realistically, the part of the reason the price was much less than a Pro was because you didn't have to, you weren't paying for all that aluminium and whatnot. And yes, the one they had a big attraction that they were sub $1,000. They were under $1,000, £1,000. And I think that was a bit of a loss because they had the original white plastic MacBooks, and then when they brought out the unibody aluminium Macs, they revised the white plastic one to have a unibody white plastic case, didn't they? Which was more round, like in the style of the unibody. But there we are. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that lack of a starter Mac, if you like. There we go. I don't know. I don't know that there's anything we can do about it. As you say,
there's nothing. Hopefully, you would think the Air would be the starter Mac, but I think it used to be. I mean, you used to be able to get an Air for $1,000, and the cheapest refurb I'm seeing is $849, which a refurb from Apple is practically like brand new to begin with.
Yeah. Oh yes, very much so.
But still,
I mean, I've been saying for a while that I'm reiterated many times that I feel that Apple is pricing out a group of people. What I think about is when I first bought my first iMac in 2007, it was a stretch to afford it. But if you compared it to a similarly spec'd PC, it was about 100 or 200 more. But that's not the case anymore. You can spec a similarly spec'd PC now, and it's thousands of pounds less. And I think that's the difference, is that at one time, when you were buying a low-end Mac, you were actually buying something that was as good as the best out there, and you were only paying a little bit more. And I think the difference, that gap's grown so that it's now significantly more expensive to buy a Mac than to buy a pretty decent PC.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I know you're not talking about the. I know you can go out and buy a PC laptop for sort of £250, but
no, I'm not talking about that.
We're not talking about that kind of bottom of the market budget.
Yeah. I think if you compared like for like, you'd probably get. So with this one, for instance, you're talking. It said the lowest price for the 13-inch was $1,799. I think you could probably pick up an equivalently powered machine for probably around about 1,200, 1,300.
Yeah, you're probably
which
looking
is quite a lot left.
What's it? Is it the HP Elite books?
That sort of thing. Or one of the svelte looking PC manufacturers that make stuff that looks a little bit like Apple stuff.
A little bit. Have you been in PC World lately? Have you been in PC World? You look down the aisle and go...
I haven't really, no.
Oh, you look at the laptops. Actually, maybe it's changed, but the last time I went in there and looked, it was like almost a MacBook Pro, almost a MacBook, almost a MacBook Pro. It was like...
Remember when there were the colored iMacs, and then all of a sudden every PC was clear and colored and everything and see-through?
Exactly. Just like the notch. Everybody was ragging on the notch, and then within 3 months, everybody was bringing out phones with notches in.
Oh, but they do say, don't they? The imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Indeed it is. Well, okay, going along with this new MacBook Pro, Apple have said that this has yet again, another refinement of the keyboard, which should make it better. And apparently, part of this improvement is this time a change of the material which they make the butterfly switches from, which Apple have said is secret. I've read online somebody says that it actually nylon is the secret ingredient.
Right.
Well, industrial, engineering nylon is a very, very tough material. Also, it's kind of self-lubricating if you make sliding parts out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that could be. Anyway, but to go along with this, Apple are now offering free keyboard replacement program for the MacBook and MacBook Pros. And, well, actually, I read elsewhere. This is on ZNet, this one. A free keyboard replacement program for the MacBook and the MacBook Pro. I read elsewhere it's any Mac that contains a butterfly keyboard.
Oh, right.
So not only have they moved it up to a 24-hour repair, they have now admitted that there is a problem. And if you have a problem with your butterfly keyboard, no matter what model, or gen of Mac that you have, they will replace it for free. I don't know what they're going to do about people who've already shelled out considerable sums of money, but there we are. Maybe they'll do some kind of refund.
Unfortunately, it's one of those things, isn't it, where someone has a good idea and said, "Oh, I've made these butterfly keyboards. It's going to be so cool. We'll be able to make them so thin." And everyone said, "Oh, that's a really good idea." And then as time's gone on, it's, "Oh, heck, what can we do to make this work now? We don't really want to redesign the whole all the computers. So, well, maybe we'll stick a little bit of this in. Oh, that hasn't worked very well. Oh, okay, we'll put some nylon in."
I suspect that the problem with it is that it's probably a brilliant engineering solution. I suspect that, Johnny Ive and his crew spent a long time working on that and to create what is actually a very, very clever switch mechanism, and shaves the keyboard down to half the depth, which is great for what they want. But unfortunately, I suspect some of these things, you're only going to find out the real world consequences of reducing the travel in the keys that much in time.
That's right. And also, they sort of hadn't really taken into account, had they, the fact that people like me eat my lunch over my keyboard and end up growing things out of it.
Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true. I just don't think they maybe exposed their test models to, as you say, as you said before, the Nick test.
Absolutely.
What do you mean you're eating your blinking crisp bread sandwiches over the top of the keyboard? Look, the crumbs are going. Oh no!
No, I didn't do it intentionally. Oh dear, I've dropped tomato on it now. Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody eats in front of their computer.
Of course not.
No, nobody does such a thing. Nor do kids, do anything remotely like typing on it with fingers covered with salty, greasy fingers, jammy fingers. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Obviously they added was it a kind of neoprene layer last time in revision 3, which appears to have been quite helpful, and it would appear that the revision in this one is to make the switches out of industrial nylon. All of which might help. I mean, eventually, I'm pretty sure Apple aren't going to give up on it. It's too far gone. They've committed to it. They're just going to have to make it work. That said, I suppose, when was the last time somebody came up with a completely new keyboard mechanism? I'm pretty sure those original mechanical typewriters weren't all perfect and first time out.
No.
There we go.
No, they wouldn't have been.
About 5 years from now, there'll be a totally new keyboard, or there'll be no keyboard or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the next stage will be will effectively be keyboards with no real moving parts. I'm pretty sure eventually that's what they're aiming for. How they're going to get there.
I wonder whether people who type for a living will like that. I don't know.
Well, it depends. It depends on how how you can make it feel.
What the feedback feels like. Yeah,
it's all about.
They do it with the phone, like with the
haptic.
The home, the haptic sensor, and don't they do that on the touchpad now? The what do they call it?
Well, yeah, the track.
Yes,
the
that's all
trackpad.
haptic. Yeah,
it's not real, is it? Well, on the modern ones anymore, it's like the button on the iPhone 6, the solid state button,
right? That's what
which felt like a button clicking, but it wasn't really clicking at all.
I don't see why they wouldn't do that with keys. They can.
The only problem with that is you'd have to have that's an awful lot of haptic engines.
Right.
That could get very expensive. That could get very, very expensive. Oh, we've got 105 haptic engines in this, and one for each key.
Well, as a consequence, we're having to put double the price of the MacBook.
Also, we've had to fit a huge extractor fan to the side to get rid of the heat.
And the detritus, of course.
Yeah. Oh dear. I'm talking about.
But nothing will get under the keys that way.
That is true. That is definitely true. I mean, actually, I don't know if I mentioned this. I've got a little one of these micro skins on my keyboard.
Oh right, yeah.
I picked it up. I think I mentioned it on the show, but I picked it up from Amazon for about £7 or something. It's like a micro thin shaped kind of neoprene layer.
I know what you mean.
And it goes over.
And you find that's okay?
I do find that okay. Yeah. It's not perfect. It's not the same as typing straight onto the keys because it's never going to be perfect. But I've found it acceptable, perfectly acceptable, and I do quite a lot of typing.
Fair enough.
And it does mean that it's not going to protect it from everything, but it does mean that your basic biscuit crumbs are not going to go in my keyboard.
Yeah.
There we are.
It's all right. You haven't asked me around yet, Simon, so you're perfectly safe.
Well, actually, it is surprising with that. You look down at your keyboard, even when you don't think there's any reason for there to be on it, and you think, why is there all stuff on my on my keyboard?
Yeah.
Right. Well, the WWDC 2019, of course, was announced. Chaps.
Hurrah!
Hurrah! Like we all didn't know that it was going to come. 3rd to the 7th in San Jose, as previously. I'm not going to get into any what the WWDC will bring us, but
they'll tell us about some software, definitely.
Yes, they'll probably talk about software and developers. They'll talk about I'll talk a lot of developers. The most interesting thing to me was that the quote unquote invitations used the same art theme as the It's Showtime event. And in that they have the sort of neon line drawings of the robot and the monkey and the skull, and this time a unicorn as well. With the whole, stuff blowing out of their mind blown. I think that whereas the other one was It's Showtime, mind blowing content. This one is write code, blow minds, I believe is the strap line. There we go. I just found that interesting that they'd kind of followed on, because I don't think I've ever seen Apple do that.
Yes, because normally they go for some. They like people to guess, don't they?
Mm.
Yeah.
So here's a thought. Maybe so I'm thinking they did this to show that the two announcements are related, and maybe there's something with Apple TV coming.
That is
like a new, like hardware wise, that maybe there's going to be a new Apple TV at WWDC.
I don't know. It's interesting. It's just so very unusual. I mean, yes, people always dig into the invitations in an attempt to find some sort of clue. I mean, there's been a lot of talk of dark mode, because obviously these neon drawings are on a dark background.
So I've just seen one that's got write code, blow minds. Is that like the underlying theme behind them all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think because the other one was mind blowing content, I think was the thing for Showtime.
Ah, right, okay.
And this is write code, blow minds. So it's the same thing with the bits all exploding out of the emojis' heads.
I reckon they've done it because it gives everyone so much to talk about.
Well,
there's so many different things in there.
Well, exactly. There's all sorts of things. One of them's got like a diamond on, sort of falling off to the bottom left. make of that what you will. But then if you go onto one of the other cards, that slot is taken with a cog.
Ah.
It'll be interesting if they continue it into the fall events that they have. Maybe they're doing like an annual theme now instead of a different theme for every event.
Yeah, it's very artistic.
Yeah, clever, isn't it?
Very good.
Very good. There we go. This is sort of related to what John and I were talking about. Pegatron are apparently moving iPad and MacBook manufacturing out of China and to Indonesia. This was on the Cult of Mac. Well, it is what it is. I mean, Pegatron are obviously, a massive supplier to Apple, along with Foxconn. And apparently they're moving looking to move some of their factories to Indonesia. My speculation on that would be the whole, don't keep all your eggs in one basket, and also possibly, of course, to try and mitigate any China-US trade war.
Looks like it, doesn't it? And of course, the numbers they manufacture these in aren't quite on the level that iPhones are. So, in some ways, it's easier to move these first.
Yes, iPads and MacBooks, I'm pretty sure. Well, we know for a fact are not manufactured at anywhere near the kind of volumes that the iPhone is. So, yeah.
As you say, all eggs in different baskets. It makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's that's what John and I were talking about, and it would appear probably that Pegatron are simply trying to protect themselves against US sanctions, tariffs, whatever you wish to call it. A survey. This is on Redmond Pi. A survey of higher education students says 71% would prefer to use a Mac. There we go.
I'm not surprised.
Not surprising.
No, not surprising.
Macs are very nice. I'm not surprised they wouldn't want one.
No, there we go.
Even younger students want Macs just from iPhones and iPads from what I've seen in my years of teaching. Yep.
Which in a way again falls back to the the loss of the white plastic MacBook, because that was a kind of ideal beginner's Mac, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Now this,
or even the eMac. Remember the eMac?
Oh yes, the eMac, which was so popular that they finally gave in and allowed ordinary people to buy it. And it was very, very popular here in the UK. At the time, I knew a lot of people who bought eMacs because they were like a 17-inch iMac, weren't they? And at the time, they were a lot cheaper than the G4 iMacs that had just come out.
Mm.
Because the G4 iMacs, obviously, the lampstand ones had LCD flat panels, which, at the time were pretty pricey. So there you go.
Almost the first paragraph of these figures said that they'd covered 2,244 people across 5 different countries.
Mm.
So it's not a huge survey, but it's indicative, I suppose.
Yeah, well, at least it's across 5 countries.
Yes, 71% of students would prefer to use a Mac, despite the fact that 60% of students actually used Windows PCs.
Mm.
And of those using a PC, 51% said they would switch to a Mac if the price wasn't an issue to them, which is interesting.
Interesting. Oh, but again, that comes down to, I'd drive a Ferrari if the price wasn't an issue to me.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd have an iMac Pro fully spec'd out. But then again, this kind of market research is always trying to say Apple is still an aspirational brand.
Yes, it is.
People would like to use a Mac, and even if it means, even if 60% of the students are actually using Windows, they are aspiring to move to a Mac at some point. So I guess that's all good for that's all good for Apple's future.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is an odd one. We were talking about this before the show. Apple is facing a class action lawsuit over alleged iTunes and Apple Music data sale. And this is on Apple Insider. This was very strange. The article doesn't really tell you a lot. Some people in New York or New England or somewhere
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, that's right. have started a class action lawsuit saying that Apple is selling information about their iTunes and Apple Music, their tastes in music, and also a whole load of other information tied to their kind of iTunes account. It all seems very odd to me. That doesn't seem in the least bit of an Apple sort of thing to be doing.
No. And I've just read the paragraph in it, which I'm still trying to get my head around. So it says, to support the claim that Apple sells, rents, transmits, or otherwise discloses to various third parties this information, the suit includes details of such information being available to buy. Significantly, the data is not sold by Apple nor limited to it.
Yeah.
So what is that? What is that saying?
Well, it's saying that a third party is selling information, which is allegedly because they mention also is it Spotify users or Pandora? I think.
Pandora.
Which again,
to draw a conclusion that therefore Apple is somehow giving it away.
Yeah, or
is
selling
not necessarily the case, is it?
I don't.
If there's no direct correlation.
No, exactly. It just isn't an Apple thing to be doing, is it? I mean, what does Tim, Uncle Tim says all the time, we make our money selling hardware. Yeah, you are not our product. We don't care about your data because we do our best to not even know what your data is.
It seems a bit weird, doesn't it, that they'd spend so much time talking about privacy, which they do all the while, and then give it away. That doesn't sound right.
No, there is mention in there that a developer pointed out to Apple some time ago a bug. He'd found a bug which allowed developers to get that sort of information.
Right.
I.e., what a user's name, Apple ID, their playlists, and so on. So I don't know if somehow somebody extracted a load of that data and then sold it. In which case, yeah, shame on Apple for not closing the hole, I suppose, or, not being aware of it. But at the same time, that's not Apple, is it? So,
no.
Somebody breaking into your house, stealing your stuff, and then selling it on eBay is not your house.
Selling it.
It's not you, and it's not your house builder's fault, is it? You can't sue the person who built the house because somebody broke into it. No, I don't know.
I'm sure someone's tried or will try.
I'm sure. I'll be interested to see what happens with that one because apparently, as yet, Apple have not commented. I'm sure that's because they've got their legal team poring over the ramifications, but
they're probably just trying to understand what it's going on about.
But yes, I can't really see Apple collecting and selling information about what music you listen to or download or whatever, because it's just totally antithetical to what they say they stand for.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that one.
We'll see where it goes, if it goes anywhere.
If it goes anywhere. There's another short one here. Angela Arendts says, mission accomplished and denies reported criticisms. This was on Apple Insider. Well, guess what? Angela has said pretty much what we thought when she left. When she left Apple, I remember discussing it probably with you, Nick, where we said, I think we probably pretty much said, I think she's done what she came to do and feels that it's time to move on. And now she's effectively, explicitly said so. She described, leaving Apple as mission accomplished. There we are.
Fair enough.
Right. Well, we've been going a fair while, so I think we should go over to John in his hardware store while we possibly refresh our beverages, and we'll be back shortly.
Today we're really going to wish we had a video podcast instead of audio because we are reviewing the Catalyst CATALYST waterproof 20-liter backpack. Comes in black. It arrives in a nice snug little pouch. Very, very compact. Pull it out of the pouch. This is $120 in the U.S., and Simon will have the international links for it in our show notes for this episode on Essential Apple. So excuse any commotion because we are now going to put a towel inside it. Very, very lightweight, thin bath towel in there. Oh, there's room for two of them. Great, let me get another one. It's quite spacious, more than I thought. There's a zipper pocket on the front. and 2 really good water bottle stretchy pockets on the side. Now this pack is really loaded, actually bigger than I thought it was. And then I snap the snap shut over the ring flap that goes over the roll area. I have to find out more about that later on. Put it on my back. Let's see, how does it feel? Oh, there is a chest strap, which is nice. Very stretchy, very, very lightweight. Let's tighten it up. Extremely thin tightening straps. I hope they hold up, but Catalyst is a very good company, known for top quality waterproof products. I have a Catalyst case on my iPhone that I'm recording with right this moment. Put the chest strap on here. It's secure. Let's look in the mirror, see how I look. Oh, I see. It's a very stylish black ultralight pack. The only question I'll have to ask the company about is that small rain flap at the top. But as an actual carrying backpack with a light load, it's pretty good. Now let's put it to the test. Let's go outside here. Get my hat on because I'm in Arizona and it is sunny. Always want to be careful about sun exposure. I'll walk over to the faucet here. Chest band off. Take it off my back. Set it here on the ground. Turn on some water. See how waterproof this baby is. Okay, I'm spraying it with water. And the water beads up. I'll need to practice a little bit more with rolling that top, but I'm sure I can find out how to do that. Some of the reviews said that the front zippered pocket was not as waterproof as the inside, so we'll just have to take their word for that. Now let's take it for a dip in the pool. Put my wrist strap on. The Catalyst case comes with a wrist strap on my iPhone. So let's dip this black case right in the pool, because I gave it a good drink with the hose to simulate a good rainstorm. Now let's really, I'm not going to submerge it, but I'm just going to kind of push it around inside the pool, not all the way up to the very top, because it says don't submerge it completely. But it's getting a nice, good dip. The water just beads up, rolls right off it. How about that? Okay, set the phone down. Unroll the rolled part. Oh, it's totally dry inside. I don't even need a towel to dry the towels that are on the inside. So what we learned is for $120, which is a premium price, you get an ultralight, ultra waterproof, unusual roll top design. It's comfortable and it can stow anywhere. You can take it with you in case you get caught in a storm if you're cycling or hiking or just out and about, going to school, going to work, or wherever you happen to go. And I think we will stock a few of these at Nemo's hardware store. Let's see how they move at that $120 price tag. And we will have more to report on this product after we take it out into a rainstorm, which will probably take place later in the summer. So we'll be back again soon from Nemo's hardware store with more great gear from Catalyst and other companies.
Thank you, John. And as ever, of course, all the links will be in the show notes. And of course, if you're going to buy anything from Amazon, don't forget we have a big red button on the website, which if you use that and then go to Amazon and buy something, hopefully we should get a small kickback as a thank you. There we go. So, what shall we have a look? We shall move on, I think. We shall move on. Well, the big technology story, of course, is Huawei and the blacklisting debacle. Isn't it?
It is. It seems to get more and more complicated by the day.
It does. It does get more and more. I mean, the original explanation was supposed to be that the US administration, shall we say, have been conducting, as we know, a fairly aggressive attack on China, certainly in the trade arena. They've also been conducting a bit of a campaign against Huawei, saying that Huawei should not be allowed to supply parts of the 5G infrastructure in the US, and they've kind of leaned on the UK to the same end. They've banned the use of Huawei produced products by, like, for example, the US military. Don't forget, Huawei do a lot more than phones. Huawei are like Nokia. Their original, their core business was in telecoms. It's infrastructure, routers, and all that sort of thing.
Yes, because the UK are talking about the 5G network, aren't they?
Yes, and whether or not Huawei should be allowed to, bid to construct large parts of it.
Yes.
And the US have then said, we believe that Huawei are, effectively spying for the People's Republic of China, and we're going to blacklist them, which has quite a lot of implications in its own, in the political sense. But in the technological sense, it brings up a whole load of other issues because, first of all, Google, the US just said, Huawei are blacklisted. Then Google said, well, we can no longer support Huawei. So, they would not be able to have access to the Google store and the Google services. Now, in China, I don't think that would actually affect Huawei all that much. I mean, they could fork Android themselves. China has all its own services. It has its own app stores and its own maps. And, Google isn't even allowed in China. So in China itself, I don't think that would have a huge effect, although obviously it would probably cripple their sales in the West. But then it got more complicated because ARM said, we can't deal with you anymore. We can't supply you with chips, or, well, not, with the designs for chips, because ARM don't actually make any chips, they design the chips.
Yes. So they won't allow them a license to operate.
And so then the thing came back, why is that, right? Why ARM denying Huawei access, future access? And ARM came back and said, we, our hands are tied because some of our intellectual IP comes from the US. And therefore, if we deal with you, we could find ourselves on the wrong end of the US administration. And then you get into the realms of, despite being a Chinese company and making, effectively Chinese phones, they still have, some of their components are from the US.
Yes, and most of them are going to have ARM licensed property in them, as it were.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah. It also says in this article that two British carriers, EE and Vodafone, have said that they won't offer Huawei phones on 5G.
Yep. So
yeah, it's not just it's multiple companies, isn't it, that are saying they can't really. I mean, basically, it's that they can't. They rely on America so much they can't really stop putting America's
what most of these companies who are effectively saying they can no longer deal with Huawei, it's not they're not saying we think you are a bad actor and we do not wish to deal with you. What they're saying is we cannot risk retaliation from the US.
Yeah.
If we continue to deal with you.
I mean, in some ways, ARM's a little bit of a funny one, isn't it? Because isn't ARM owned by a Chinese consortium now?
I've no idea. I mean, ARM originally was come out of Acorn and was a British company.
Yeah. No, but they sold some within the last couple of years. They've sold, and I thought it was a Chinese consortium. So it's a little bit weird. Anyway,
it's not. They
still have to work in the West, of course.
Yeah. And it's not the Taiwan group though, is it? TMSC?
It might be.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm going out into left field there. But what it highlighted more than anything else, I think, is just how global this stuff is actually. People look at Huawei as a Chinese company making Chinese phones in Chinese factories with Chinese components. But they're no more wholly Chinese than an Apple iPhone is wholly American. This stuff
well, that's right. Yeah.
This stuff is traded internationally between huge companies who specialise in so you've got, to some extent...
Same with Apple. Apple stuff comes from all over the place, doesn't it? All the bits. Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's assembled by Foxconn and Pegatron and whatnot, but not all of the components are manufactured in China, in Chinese factories. There are lots of other bits that go in. I mean, we know for a fact, don't we, that they use Samsung screens. So Samsung screens are manufactured in Korea and then have to be shipped to Shenzhen.
Yeah. It's a complicated mess, really, isn't it? I've just looked up ARM, by the way, and they're owned by SoftBank, which is Japanese.
Japanese. Okay, there we go. So yeah, it is a hot mess. And then, of course, you have the whole thing of whether or not you are prepared to take the initial premise that Huawei are a bad actor who, do stuff on behalf of the Chinese government. And
well,
I don't think that's true.
hard to know, isn't it? One way or another.
But then, what I'm saying is they can't be blatantly backdooring every device they make, because that would...
No, because people would discover that, wouldn't they?
People would know.
Yeah,
so
of course they would.
Then if you say, but they might be putting backdoors in certain critical components, which, of things which maybe they could use at a later date against, say, the US in, some weird scenario, then you could say... But I could probably point to any other company anywhere in the world and say, how are you to know that they are not being coerced by their government in order, to do...
I mean, it's obvious, isn't it, that this is quite political.
It's all politics.
It's politics. It's not really based upon clear facts. It's based upon supposition and...
I think a lot of it's based upon, outright fear-mongering, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm pretty, I don't want to get too political, but I am pretty sure that Mr. Trump has a distinct and obvious bias against the Chinese in all situations, and for some reason, thinks that he can bring them down by sanctioning them. And I think he's very wrong. That doesn't mean I, think that the People's Republic of China is the best place in the world.
No,
but
no. Those two things can be mutually exclusive. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to agree with a politician to think that throwing a brick at him is wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a bit like the whole, I don't want to get into politics, but the whole milkshake thing, whilst somewhat amusing, is also somewhat disconcerting, because if throwing a milkshake is acceptable, then what's the next one? A bottle, a brick, a bomb? There we are. So...
by the way, for Donny, because he probably wonders what we're talking about. One of our politicians had a milkshake thrown at them last week.
Okay.
Well, several of them did, actually. It became a bit of a thing, didn't it? Yeah. Bit of a thing. I did particularly like the report about one of them where they, after saying that so-and-so was arrested for throwing a milkshake over Mr. Nigel Farage, they then went on at great length about what milkshake it was and where he bought it and how much it cost. And that it was a banana and salted caramel. And I was like, really? Right, okay. Okay, that's enough of that. The danger, politics alert. Adobe have apparently warned customers of potential legal action if they continue using older versions of Creative Cloud apps. And this kind of ties into the thing that we were talking about where, Adobe had withdrawn older versions of CC apps from your available download list. It would appear that in some older versions, they were using technology which, they had licensed, and the licenses have now expired.
That's a bit awkward.
Yes.
This is another strange one.
Yes, it is.
What if you're on a machine that doesn't support a newer version, but you're stuck? You switch. You switch to Affinity or Pixelmator or something.
Yeah, well, definitely, very much so. I think, let's face it, in reality, if you are, one of us, and you have an older machine and you are using, Creative Cloud 2014 or something, I don't think the police are going to come knocking on your door.
No.
Right?
No.
I don't think whoever licensed Adobe, some piece of code that's in there, is going to come banging on your door demanding you stop doing it.
But Simon, haven't they got Adobe 2014 detector vans?
Probably. Realistically, it's a bit of a odd story. I guess it's what it is, as far as I can see, is it's Adobe trying to explain in a kind of backhanded manner why they've stopped offering downloads of older versions.
it's a weird way to do it, though, by saying you could get sued if you're still using these older versions.
Yeah.
It is Creative Cloud, though. And I thought the whole point of the cloud was that your apps get updated automatically.
Well,
but maybe I don't understand.
Well, no.
I don't use it either, but I would think if your machine is too old, it won't update it.
Well, that's true.
To the newer version.
You can... The main idea is, yes, that you keep up to date automatically. You can download the latest versions as they're released.
Right.
And, and there's a continual stream of updates. But until recently, if you went into your, Creative Cloud management thing, you could download sort of, 2019 latest release, 2019 previous release, 2018 final release, 2018 first, 2017.
Yeah.
You could download, I don't know how many it was. As I explained, we're still using an older version of InDesign because we have some machines which would probably not be able to run 2019. And
that's fair enough. Yeah.
InDesign is pretty much the only app we use now where you're working on effectively, live files. If you're working on InDesign documents, you have to work in InDesign.
Yes.
If you create something in Photoshop, it doesn't matter what version of Photoshop I use on my machine. I can close it and hand it off to, the Office Junior. And if he wants to make an edit, he can still open that in whatever version of Photoshop his machine will run.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work like that with InDesign. You all have to be running the same version, or you'll get the endless thing of, I can't open this version because it says my version is older than your version.
Right, yeah.
So we all have
I wonder if the license agreement for a Creative Cloud that everyone just clicks through and doesn't read has a stipulation that this could potentially happen down the road, or if Adobe's in for a big lawsuit from a bunch of users.
Who knows? Yes. I mean, we had a huge discussion in the Slack, didn't we? It kind of, I think it was this story that led to the whole kind of Adobe alternatives. And of course, earlier on, I mentioned Affinity Publisher, and part of the reason for that is, although I use Creative Cloud at work, and I used to have easy access to Creative Cloud at home because we had a spare slot, as it were. We no longer have a spare slot. They're all taken in the office, which means using it at home involves a lot of signing in and signing out and getting a two-factor authentication code and all sorts of other jiggery-pokery. So I thought, well, to be honest, I think it's time I moved away from Adobe at home. So I got Affinity Photo first, which it is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It is so like Photoshop. That's it. It's so like Photoshop, you don't even have to think about it, really.
It's strange you should say that, because I was talking to someone at church yesterday who used Photoshop when she took one of the computer training course, design training course. She's retired, and she said that she suddenly didn't think she could justify continuing to pay a regular amount out to Adobe, and several of the people in the group that she's in recommended Affinity Photo.
Yeah,
and she said, and it's great, and it's I can do almost everything I want. It's just like Photoshop.
It is just like Photoshop, and it supports Photoshop brushes, and you can bring in your layered PSD files, and it's
jolly good.
Go ahead.
What's really bizarre about this, reading a bit more into it, is that Adobe seemed to have lost the license to part of what they were distributing, which is a bit strange, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I guess they maybe had some kind of, I don't know, because they're so vague about what it is. If they told you specifically, it's like it's like when Apple had the Rosetta technology.
Yes.
Right? They had, for several OS versions, they had the Rosetta technology, which allowed, was it Intel machines to effectively handle PowerPC coded?
It was, yeah.
Apps, I think. And they, after several, I don't know, however many versions it was, three OS updates, I think, they brought one out, and it was like, this doesn't have Rosetta in it. And of course, there were some people who were up in arms saying, "How dare you pull the Rosetta support?" And blah blah blah. And they said, "Well, it's not our technology. We licensed it.
Right, okay.
We licensed that technology from Rosetta Inc. And we licensed it for 4 years or 5 years, whatever it was, and that's expired. And to be honest, we've been telling you, if you're still using PowerPC apps 5 years after we stopped doing it, hard luck, really."
The difference is that Apple wasn't telling people you need to stop using Rosetta in your older machines or you're going to get sued.
No, that is true. They didn't. Yeah. They simply pulled. It was simply no longer available on, on their new OS because the time, the license that they'd taken out with Rosetta has expired. And I assume that they probably, quite perfectly, unbelievably, was like, well, we don't need to do this forever.
Right. You have to move on at some point.
Yeah, it's a bridge, and after so much time, all the apps should have been redone purely for Intel. So,
I like this. There's a tweet in the middle of this article. It says, "I just got an email from Adobe that I'm no longer allowed to use the software that I'm paying for. Time to cancel my subscription, I guess."
I suspect they're going to lose a lot of customers. I mean, not enough to put a dent in it, but a lot of customers that are like the small person using the old software. I mean, like we said, the odds are of someone coming knocking on your door if you're using this old software is probably slim. But do you want to take that chance if your whole business depends on running this software on an older machine when you can go out and just buy something like Affinity for, I think it's $50 or something, and not even worry about it?
Exactly. That's true. As I say, I got Affinity Photo. Obviously, I'm on the Affinity Publisher beta, and this week actually I gave a demonstration of Affinity Publisher beta to my Mac user group, and that brought up a lot of discussion about Adobe alternatives as well. And Affinity is very much seems to be getting a real foothold. And not just with home users. Our chairman is a professional theatre photographer, and he said that he thinks Affinity is absolutely amazing and probably worth way more than the £50 he paid for it.
That's what I was going to say. Not only is it a great alternative, it's affordable. I mean, even before the Creative Cloud, Photoshop, Illustrator, they were expensive to buy outright.
It's
$50.
Yeah, $50, $50 or £40, I think, in the UK, and
which is affordable in the old scheme of things before we had, app stores and things.
Yes, very much so. And of course there are other alternatives as well. You've got your Pixelmators, and you've got your Skylum, Luminar, that sort of thing.
So and there's Affinity Photo and Designer for the iPad, which is, I think,
that is
$20,
true.
I want to say, and both of those are are fantastic also.
They are indeed. I don't have an iPad, but again, people I know who've tried it, rave about it. I've now picked up Affinity Designer to sort of complete the trifecta. But I haven't really experimented with yet. I suspect that's the one which is likely to be the least like Illustrator. The publisher, if you're used to InDesign or Quark Express or any other half-decent desktop publisher, then you will feel immediately at home with the Affinity publisher. I haven't looked at the Designer yet. Vector drawing apps can be a bit odd. Let's just put it that way.
I think I said this in the Slack. I don't remember, but I've tried tons of the Illustrator type of apps for the year, and Affinity Designer was the one I used that was most like drawing in Illustrator.
Right. Yes, and I think you did say that. Yes, you are right. It was you. You did put that.
The tools act the way they would act in Illustrator, where other ones where I've tried, when you try to do something, it doesn't do what you think it would do. But in Designer, it does what you're used to if you're an Illustrator user.
Yeah, I think that's, as I say, I haven't really experimented with the designer yet, but I am no doubt I will get to grips with it. Well, this week, there was a sudden announcement from Panic, wasn't there? Panic Software, came totally out of left field. Wayhan posted about it as well, I think, saying, why a gaming company that kept producing weird Mac utilities has suddenly come out with a gaming device. Because yes, Panic Software. He said the name made him think that they were a game developer. Of course, they're not. They're the makers of people like Transmit and various other utilities. They've announced this tiny little thing called Playdate. It's
just
yellow.
A week of weird stories.
Yeah, it's yellow. It fits in your pocket. It's got a beautiful black and white screen. It's not super cheap, but not super expensive. Includes brand new games from amazing creators. Plus, it has a crank. And it looks a bit like a Game Boy, I'm thinking, but smaller and thinner and cooler. And yes, I mean, my immediate thought was that, a crank. It's no charge. You wind it up, wind the handle to, But that's not what it does. It doesn't. You don't power it with the crank. The crank is actually
the interface almost.
One of the control mechanisms, because it's got your sort of typical cruciform, joypad.
Yes.
And 2 buttons, and then this little crank on the side.
How bizarre!
It's a very.
I said before the show, it looks like something you'd find on Kickstarter.
Yeah, it does. But they've got a whole load of people. The first, I think you're going to get a free game every week for the first 12 weeks over the air if you buy this thing.
Did you scroll down to near the bottom of the page? They have I guess it's like a video of one of the games and the crank's turning. And I mean, the graphics aren't too impressive for, I don't know what the price of this is going to be, but
$150.
It looks like what would be a free iOS game, the thing I'm looking at.
Yes, it's a like wireframe thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a bit strange, really.
I don't see it taking off. It's not going to put a dent in the Game Boy business.
No, and yet, but the net went wild. The net has gone absolutely wild. I mean, John Gruber was like, this is amazing. I don't know. I guess maybe people are jazzed by it because it's new and it's a bit different.
A bit different. Yeah.
Different?
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
I won't be buying one.
Yeah, it's a bit. I don't know what to make of it. There we go. It is a slightly. What does it say here? It's 12 brand new video games, one each week. We'd like to keep the games a secret until they appear on the Playdate. We want to surprise you. Some are short, some are long, some are experimental, some are traditional.
What did you want to know what the games would be like before you shelled out $150?
Yeah, probably. I'd want some idea of what it's going to be like. Yes.
It's
Oh, good luck to them.
Well, yeah.
I'm not sure what they're going to.
Well, the thing is,
some people are going to buy it, aren't they? Some people are going to buy it just to try it.
Yes.
Right.
Some people are going to buy it just to try it. I guess it's Panic Software. If the thing doesn't really succeed, I don't suppose they're not. It's not a bet. We're betting the company on this. If it doesn't,
right?
No.
It's bravo for them for trying something different, right?
Yeah, and it's like if it doesn't fly, as it were, then I guess they'll just be disappointed. But it's not going to end the company, and maybe who can tell? Sometimes these things just catch on, don't they? You know what I mean?
The other question would be is how much are the games going to cost when they do start charging for them?
Well, yes, that is true. Based on the kind of thing, I would assume that they're not going to be shockingly expensive.
I'm guessing it's going to have a subscription.
Possible. That's possible, I suppose. That there'll be a subscription type of service. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of it. It's almost
the crank. It says the crank came from our friends at Teenage Engineering. They were our partners for Playdate's design.
Who can say?
I'd be fascinated to know if it might. I mean, who knows? It could become a real thing.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Some of these, well, yeah, some things just do, don't they? Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, yes.
As it were.
We'll make a note in a year from now. come back to this conversation and
see
yes,
if it's got
if it exists or where it is, or
it's going to be, whatever happened to the Playmate or Playdate, or is it?
Or how many of us actually own one and can't stop playing it?
Yes,
indeed.
I sold my Mac last week to buy a Playdate. Yeah.
I guess I can see at $150. I can see a lot of people in our sort of sphere. So you can imagine people like Gruber and Marco, and you know what I mean, all rushing out to buy one. I guess it's got a kind of certain amount.
That's not going to make success. I mean, if the games are like phone games, why would you want to carry around something like this when you can just do it on your phone also?
Depend. It will all.
Yeah, that's true.
It will all depend on the content. That's the truth.
And you won't have a crank if you're using your phone.
Yeah,
that's true.
All 12 games in Season 1 will be included, no extra charge. So it's possible after that you'll have to sign up, I guess, for, X number of games at a time. Who can say? Good luck to them. Nice to see somebody who's, doing something a little different, I suppose. Whether it
just
will
a little bit out of the blue.
Website.
Well.
Whether it will fly, I suspect, will depend on the quality of the games.
Or what do you mean? If they're really bad, people will throw them.
Well, if the games aren't any good, the novelty's going to wear off. And then when they say, do you want to pay us, I don't know, whatever it is, $25 for the next X number of games, people are probably going to go, hell no, If the games are great and, amusing and entertaining, then people will probably carry on.
Maybe so.
Donny's right on that one. That's one to come back to, I guess. What else? Not a huge amount, really. Apparently, there is now check for issues before installing a Windows 10 update. CNET. Apparently, there is now a website, I guess, provided by Microsoft, which will warn you of potential issues with, a new Windows 10 update release. Check first.
That's useful.
Yeah, basically. I know it. I'm not being sarcastic here. That's not a bad thing for any company to be providing, because no update to anything is perfect on everybody's equipment.
No, that's right.
Apple have had a few of their own, haven't they, where certain users have found that a certain update to iOS or Mac OS causes unexpected havoc on certain combinations of hardware. So not a bad thing. There we go. And this isn't in the show notes, but I did see Apple have agreed with some European body that in future iOS releases will come with a relevant warning that it might slow down your device if you are on a older device.
Oh yes, I saw that as well.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing.
No, I assume in the same way that they will be, if you have the lowest device supported by this update, it may cause, a slight loss of performance. In case you were really dim and didn't bloody already well know that. Are you hard of thinking? There we go. Right. And the last bit, really, of course, is we've got security and privacy.
I was just looking over all the headlines you released. You put it in the show notes for this section.
Yeah.
You should just rename this section, what company leaked what this week?
Yeah. Who leaked what? Yeah. WhatsApp apparently discovered a targeted surveillance attack. Snapchat employees were spying on people by misusing internal tools. Shame. San Francisco is the first US city to ban facial recognition technology on the BBC News. That's a little bit more interesting. And California's Senate may ban facial recognition tech in body cameras for police on Engadget. There we go.
I'm not 100% convinced. I mean, I saw a bit of video this week of the Welsh police using facial recognition and getting very, surrounding basically a guy because he didn't want his face taken.
Yes.
I mean, there are questions, aren't there, around civil liberties? I mean, you really should have the right, if you don't want your face to be taken, you should have the right to hide your face if that's what you wish to do.
Yes, well...
Now, let me clarify that. In a public place, if you were going into a building and in the same way as, during the troubles with Ireland, we would often have our cases and things searched when we went into buildings, I'd be quite happy with my face being taken for security reasons in a building. But in the street, I mean, the thing in the UK, if you're in a public place, you're probably being filmed anyway. But really, if you want to hide your face from that, that's perfectly up to you, and you should be able to do that. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It is. Well, the other problem is at the moment is that these technologies, highly unreliable.
Yes, and lots of false negatives and all that.
So, yes, the somebody mentioned, I think it was Mac Jim mentioned in the Slack room, the one you were talking about, where apparently they were using, whether they were testing or demoing some sort of facial recognition technology. And a guy covered his face, and they basically arrested him. Well, he's not done anything.
Well, yeah, it was quite intimidating the way that they surrounded him and badgered him, basically.
Why don't you want us to? Yes, that's.
I thought it was very poor.
That's distinctly, 1984, isn't it? Big Brother.
It is.
How dare you move away from the surveillance tools? So San Francisco is banning it, and California are talking about banning it. Google has had to recall its Bluetooth Titan security keys because they have a security bug in them.
Oh, dear.
That's a bit embarrassing.
Just a little bit, isn't it?
Yes, our Titan security key will keep you safe with two-factor authentication and stuff, except it doesn't work properly. Oh, dear. There we go. 33 Linksys router models are leaking the full historic record of every device ever connected to them on Ars Technica. Oh, dear. Another disaster there. And a bug hunter. This is bad news for Windows, this one. Bug hunter has revealed another Make Me Admin Windows 10 zero-day flaw. And vows there's more where that came from. And I believe, subsequent to that headline, that person has released at least 2 more Windows 0-day flaws. Ho-hum. And if you really want to get depressed, there's an op-ed in the New York Times called The Internet Security Apocalypse You Have Probably Missed. Don't read that unless you are in a fairly good mood and prepared to become depressed.
To bed at night.
Don't read this if you're already feeling a bit out of sorts, because you'll probably want to go away and drown yourself or something.
Oh dear.
Yeah, no, that's another depressing piece. Unfortunately, you're right. The security and privacy section has become a litany of misery.
Unless you don't really care about your privacy, in which case, who cares?
Yeah, that's right. That's right indeed. I've got kind of some worth of chirps. I'm not sure who posted this. There's a Mac OS tool which will automatically open Apple News links in Safari or Safari Technical Preview, if that's your preferred option. This is on 9to5 Mac. I've got a direct download link in the things as well, which it's Lapcat software, and it's on GitHub. I've downloaded it. I've said before, I like Apple News. I really use Apple News on my phone a lot. And Apple News on the Mac is okay. And it's okay for browsing. This is the thing. I like Apple News as a way to browse through stories. It's not necessarily the greatest way to read the stories. And on Mojave, as I said when I first discovered this, you can't. If you take an Apple News link and paste it in Safari, it will just take you back to the News app, which forced me to use a third-party browser in order to get to the original stories. What this Stop the News does is register itself as the default handler for Apple News links. And effectively, when you click an Apple News link, this little app will open, grab the source URL, and post it into Safari for you. So there you go.
Cool.
It is cool. It's free. It's just a little thing. It's nice because it means I can browse stories on Apple News, but I can, if I wish, follow Apple News links in Safari rather than having to, use a third-party app. My other worth of chirp, Beelight Software, Amadine, which is their vector drawing app, has left beta. It's now £20 in the Mac App Store or $20 US direct from the link. You can also get a free trial on the Amadine page. So that's not an Illustrator competitor. That's not up in the same bracket as Affinity Designer. But it's a nice little vector tool. And
it's kind of like a get your feet wet kind of.
Yeah, and as we talked about in the Slack room, there are reasons, there are horses for courses. Those of us who are used to that sort of level of complexity from Creative Suite would find something, we find something like Affinity Publisher with its hundreds of palettes and hundreds of tools, welcoming because it, has everything we're used to. A beginner would look at it and probably throw up their hands in horror.
Yeah.
They would be better off with something like Swift Publisher, which, whilst very powerful, is nowhere near as complex because they've stripped away a lot of,
That's right. Lots of hand-holding.
Lots of stuff. Well, yeah, and there's an awful lot of things that, people who are starting out probably don't really care about very much. The ability to alter the spacing between individual letters, by fractions of a, fractions of a space at a time is lovely for professionals like me and probably of no interest whatsoever to somebody who wants to make posters for their local jumble sale.
No, precisely. Did I mention, last time I was on, did I mention Oddmar?
Oddmar.
Spell it.
Oddmar.
I'm not sure.
It's a game, and I've just finished playing it, and it's one of these games that's got really, really nice graphics. You know what I mean? It's really pleasing graphics all the way through it, and it's a platformer. Oddmar is a little Viking. Who runs through this, and it's a puzzle game as well. So you have to do things in certain ways and certain orders, and there's a boss at the end of each level, and it's that kind of thing. But it's the graphics that I really like. So just a recommendation from me. It's Oddmar. I'm trying to think who it's published by.
It was just on their website.
And I was going to say, I'm going to iTunes. What does it tell me? Oddmar by Mobgi, I believe they pronounce that.
Oh, that's correct, yes.
For iOS.
You can see, if you go onto their website, the Oddmar game, you can see the sort of graphics that those aren't actual, the ones on this page aren't actual graphics, but they're pretty close to what it's really like. Oh, actually, you've got some screenshots further down.
Yeah, there are some screenshots further. We got here, Oddmar is the Apple Design Award 2018 winner.
Well, there you go. I've had it for quite a while and got stuck on part of it because I'm not a particularly good gamer. And I went back to it recently and managed to solve that bit and then sort of played it through to the end of the game. And it's good fun. Good fun for those, if you appreciate some really good graphics and fairly decent puzzle solving gameplay, then give it a try.
There we go. So I will put that link in there. Oddmar.
Cool.
Lovely. Yes, looks good. Picks for the week, as it were Stop the News, Beelight Amadine, and Oddmar from you there. Right. I think we've probably done enough.
Indeed.
I think it's time we wrapped up. So, Nick, would you like to do your very short wrap up?
Indeed. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter very occasionally, and I am Spligosh, Spligosh.
And, of course, you are in the Slack room and occasionally on Bart's show.
Indeed.
Okay, Donny, would you like to do your rather longer?
I was going to say, do we have another half hour to the show?
Listen, based on the last couple, we've got as long as it takes.
or you can just give me my own show.
You could pre-record it, Donny.
RTTEACHR on Twitter. My books and sticker apps, you can just look me up in the respective iOS stores. And I've started a new project with a family member called twofundads.com. And we're talking about doing a blog with fun stuff to do with your family. Some of it's local to our area, but a lot of it's generalized, and designed a bunch of t-shirt designs and other stuff you can get on various coffee mugs, stickers, stuff like that. There's a store link on the site. But I did make a Two Fun Dads iOS sticker pack, which is totally free, and it will be in the show notes. And if we could get as many people to download that as possible, it would be awesome. If we could somehow get it into the top 200 with Apple and get some attention, that would be great. So anyone out there can just go download it for free, delete it after you download it if you want. But we would appreciate it. And the rest of the stuff Simon will have in the show notes.
Yeah,
so like I was going to say,
you've got there's scribbly.com, which is SKRBLY, hedgehogalley.com, and you're also on designbundles.net. So there we go. That's Donny spreading his artwork far and wide. Global domination not far behind.
No, I'd say very far behind.
Right, well, I am, of course, on the Twitters as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. The show is @Essential Apple. All the stuff is on the essentialapple.com, and that's probably about it. Thank you to all the slackers. Thank you for the people who support us with Patreon or Pinecast tips or otherwise. And I think that's enough. So we'll all say goodbye now. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Essential Apple podcast. And I'd like to say, if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com, and you will find links to both Patreon and the Pinecast tips jar, where you can make a donation towards the costs of the show, or even if you're really keen, you could set up a recurring payment. And thank you very, very much to all the people who already do support us. We really do appreciate you very much indeed. This show is, of course, part of the My Mac podcasting network, where you can find a variety of other shows like the My Mac podcast with Guy and Gaz, the G-Men, Tech Fan with Tim and David, the Nintendo Club podcast, the geekiest show ever, the Three Geeky Ladies, Bart Bouchot's and his wonderful Let's Talk Apple, and possibly some more that I've forgotten. So why not go over to mymac.com, take a look at the available podcasts, and take a listen.
Hey, podcast fans. If you like listening to tech podcasts, check out the Three Geeky Ladies. Elisa, Suze, and Vicky provide a female perspective on Apple and other tech products. You can find the podcast on iTunes and their website, www.3geekyladies.com, with the number 3 spelled out. Happy listening.
This has been the Essential Apple Podcast. Goodbye, and thank you for listening.